What's up guys, Jay here, and in this video I am going to be giving you my take on the Infinity Ergodox by Input Club. So I'm going to start out by just kind of going over some non-Infinity Ergodox specific things, so just things that I like about the Ergodox in general, and that just pertain to the Ergodox in general, and then I'll get more into the Infinity itself. So for those who might not know, the Ergodox is a split keyboard design with the keys arranged in a linear layout, which means that rather than being staggered, they're actually all in a row. So at least on the Ergodox, the alphanumerics are kind of like a grid, and then there are some special modifiers and stuff along the side, and there are also two thumb clusters. Now, part of the design is a slight rearrangement of keys, so you have less of the overall alphanumerics and special characters and modifiers. So some of the kind of modifiers, if you will, become things like your quote button and your bracket buttons and stuff. But the biggest change with it is with the backspace and enter and delete keys are all on the thumb clusters. So you're not really reaching across the keyboard to hit those anymore. You're just kind of using your thumbs, which does take a little bit of getting used to, but since I have gotten used to it, it's actually really nice. The biggest thing that I like about the Ergodox itself is the fact that it's a split keyboard, meaning that you can position each half apart from each other so that your arms and your hands and your wrists can all be angled and positioned in a very natural, comfortable way. And I actually went on a trip and brought my poker with me because it's more compact. And using that for a couple days, going back to that, having your hands together, it's just really kind of an awkward and uncomfortable position now. So I don't think I'll be going back away from the Ergodox anytime soon. So before purchasing the Infinity Ergodox, I looked at some other reviews that people had posted, and a lot of them just seemed kind of like advertisements for the keyboard itself rather than a really good review. So I'm going to try to give a good, pros and cons to this thing, as well as some features. So the Infinity Ergodox itself is a keyboard kit, so it comes all in pieces, and you get the switches and the keycaps and everything separately. The assembly of it, while it does require some soldering, so you really just need to have a soldering iron, it's actually really simple to put together, and I have a video on that if you haven't seen it yet, and I'll put it up, here somewhere in this general area. So the Infinity Ergodox utilizes USB 3.0 connectors, and while the keyboard to keyboard, the part to part connection requires that USB 3.0 cable, and I guess the connection to the computer requires USB cable as well, but the connection to the computer can be plugged into a USB 2.0 port, so don't worry about needing to have a USB 3.0 port on your computer to actually use this keyboard. The Infinity Ergodox supports N-key rollover and an infinite number of programmable layers which can be stacked on top of each other, which I'll get to in a minute, as well as a little LED screen that tells you which layer you're on and changes colors corresponding to the current layer. Also, supposedly the LED screen can be programmed to do other things, which I'll also get to later. So overall, as a keyboard, the Infinity Ergodox really hits the mark. It's very comfortable to use once you get used to it. The split keyboard layout is awesome. You're actually able to, so one of the things that I liked most about 60% keyboard was that you're able to get the mouse a lot closer to you so that you're not cocking your wrist out to the side. With the split keyboard, you can actually put the mouse in between each side of each piece of the keyboard, and I find that to actually be even more comfortable, especially with gaming, because you don't need kind of the second half. You can just put one half and the mouse next to it, and it makes it a lot easier. Makes it a lot more comfortable. So one of the biggest aspects of this keyboard are the programmable layers and just the programmability in general. Since each half of the Ergodox is driven by a microcontroller, they can actually be used individually. They could be plugged in to the computer separately, and still be used as one functioning keyboard, or you can daisy chain them together, and you can actually daisy chain as many together as you wanted. I don't know exactly what you would do with that, but it's an option. So one very likely possibility is that since these things are programmable microcontrollers, you could potentially get another device that has the same microcontroller and the same firmware flash to it, and it doesn't necessarily matter if it's an Infinity Ergodox, but you could plug it into one of your other pieces and just have maybe another, maybe like a number pad or something off to the side. But as I mentioned before, this thing potentially has an infinite number of programmable layers. So with this, you can program the keys to be whatever you want them to be, essentially. You can completely rearrange the layout and completely customize it. And not only with the programming can you switch the keys around, you can actually program in macros. And what those are essentially a combination of key presses. So you could program in one key press to, say, do a Control-Alt-Delete. Or if you have some like editing software or something with a bunch of keyboard shortcuts that you use, you can just make single key presses do the entire shortcut. And then because there are only a limited number of keys, you can also have a layer that you can either temporarily switch to by holding down a key, or you can press a key to, say, latch onto a layer, and then the next key that you press will be from that layer. Or you can press a key and have it lock onto a layer, which it just completely switches to another layer, and the layers are stackable. And the fact that they're stackable really makes this useful. So for these stackable layers, let's take gaming as an example. So you have your basic layer, which has all your regular keys for day-to-day typing and whatnot. And then let's say you have a bunch of common key presses that you use for games. So you want to put those all on your on the left half of your keyboard for your gaming. So you create a second layer to keep all those. And then let's say you have game A and game B. And game A, you have a couple small tweaks that are specific to that game that you want to make to your gaming layout. And then you have game B, which has another set of tweaks that you'd like to make to your gaming layout. So you can have your basic gaming layout as layer 1, and then you can switch to layer 2 and have that be your tweaks for game B, or you could switch to layer 3 and have that, well, I guess I did that the other way around. So layer 2 would be game A, and then you can switch to layer 3 and have that have your tweaks for game B. So that's really kind of useful in that way. So now we get to kind of the unsavory part of the review, or the keyboard itself. My biggest criticism with this right now, at least, physically, everything with the keyboard works fine. I do want to say that. If you just want a normal keyboard that you can take out of the box, put together, and use it, this thing is great. There's also a utility on the Input Club website that allows you to kind of remap the keys to however you like, and you can add layers and stuff, and then it'll compile the firmware for you, and then you download that and you flash it. And you can flash it to the keyboard. The only problem with the biggest current problem with the online keyboard configuration utility is that it does not support macros. So you can only do basic key presses, just one-to-one key presses. So no stringing together Control-Alt-Delete sequence or anything like that. Because this is kind of your typical open source software, it does use a bunch of other open source components, and one of those, or a couple of those, are the driver and the flashing utility. So an issue that I ran into, so you have to download this thing to install the driver to be able to flash to the keyboard, and that's like a third-party tool utility, and it's okay, it works. And then there's this key DFU utility, which is kind of a wrapper around a DFU util, which actually does the flashing for this particular, or I guess it does it for a lot of microcontrollers, but it works for this particular microcontroller. And I have not been able to get the key DFU util to actually work. What I've had to do is figure out, so I kind of had to do some investigation and see that, hey, it's using this other utility, so I can call that utility directly from the command line and flash my keyboard that way. The other thing is, since I wanted to compile, or since I wanted to actually program macros, I had to download the controller, like the KLL stuff. So there's a bunch of different projects, bunch of different software. It's all in GitHub. The documentation is very spread out. It's very hard to read through and to figure out what exactly you need to do to get things working. There is a method for compiling through Windows, but since all of the software is actually written to be run in Linux or just a Unix-based system, you have to install Cygwin into Windows, which is like a Unix emulator, and that's not the simplest process to go through. So I'd definitely say it's more of like an intermediate advanced user process to get all that installed and working. At least the last time I checked on it, it was, and I really didn't want to have to install that on my system. But then there's also a virtual machine which you can download, and that supposedly has everything that's capable of compiling the firmware, but it's really not. So I ended up having to like update everything in that. I had to install a couple of extra things. It's been a while, so I don't really remember what all that is, and I might actually go through and figure it all out again so I can put together something that's a bit easier to use. But the point being, getting to the point where you can program this is not very easy. It takes a lot of research. It took me like several hours to figure out, and it's just not something that the average user would be able to do. So if you're buying this keyboard thinking that you're going to be able to like program in all your keys and do a whole bunch of awesome things, it's probably not going to happen, at least for a while. I mean, hopefully, and I think someday, you know, it should get to the point to where it's all put together enough to be able to easily create a keyboard layout and flash it to your keyboard. And hopefully that comes through the configuration utility online. So also the LCD screens are supposed to be programmable. I haven't actually found anything that shows how to do this yet. I haven't really looked that much into it either, though, as I just haven't really had the time. But I think maybe you might actually have to go into the firmware and change some stuff to be able to change the way that those work. So that's definitely another kind of advanced user thing, so you have to be able to know how to read code and to code yourself, I guess. One of the things that I would really like to see with this keyboard, but I'm not entirely sure it's possible or with the way that the firmware is written, but the ability to actually program in macros or just program keys and layers directly from the keyboard itself. I mean, it's got these little LCD screens. You should be able to at least have some output interface with those, so I can't see why it wouldn't be doable, but it's definitely something that would take a lot of work, and so hopefully that's coming in the future as well. I know a lot of people have requested it, so I hope I didn't forget anything. This is actually the second time I'm recording this video. The first time I rambled a lot, and it turns out this time I did too, but I think I got everything that I missed the first time in. So for something that costs about $250 all put together, let me know what you think about the keyboard in the comments. Do you think it's worth it? Do you think it's a ripoff? Do you think it's a waste of money? So, but yeah, so anyway, guys, really thanks for checking out the video. You know, it's been a while. I am going to be working on more videos. I've actually been going through footage that I have and trying to put some things together. So thanks again for watching. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, feel free to give it a thumbs down. As always, let me know what you did or didn't like in the comments, and I will see you guys in the next one.